Hey everybody, welcome back. For all you scaling heads out there, we've got D-Mars, and he's going to be talking about MEV and the limits of scaling.
Awesome, thanks so much for the intro. I can't see anyone. Who here knows what MEV is? Can you raise your hand? Okay, a bunch of people. If I say the word back running, do you know what that is? Yeah, okay, a couple of people. That's some helpful calibration. Cool, so let's get into it. Yeah, I'm D-Mars at Flashbots. I do a lot of our protocol-related work. And let's get into it. So MEV and the limits of scaling, we posted some research a couple of months ago about a new thesis we had, which is that MEV has become one of the dominant limits to scaling blockchains. And so we're gonna get into that. The key takeaway here is that there is a lot of on-chain searching. This is a new paradigm in high throughput chains where gas is very cheap, and they consume a lot of the chain's capacity, and it is very inefficient. So we'll get into it. The problem at a glance, spam bots consume more than 50% of gas and pay less than 10% of fees on certain L2s. Base added 11 million gas per second throughput between November 2024 and February 25th, and almost all of it was consumed by spam. So you can see how this thesis makes sense now. The more we scale the chain, the more spam shows up. Cool, and then another add-on thing is that 2 searchers were responsible for 80% of that spam. So there's a lot of opportunity if there's any searchers in the crowd. Cool. So we're gonna go through the anatomy of a spam transaction first. This may be hard to see, it's definitely hard to see, but this is an ETHScan quote unquote successful arbitrage. And if you look closely at it, there is a 12-cent profit and it pays 2% in fee, 2 cents in fees. So you might think, that's efficient. Okay, they extracted 12 cents and they only paid 2 cents of computation. But the true cost, when you look under the hood, this specific searcher tried this arbitrage 350 times. So that was, that's roughly 130 million gas per successful arb if you take this to the extreme. And that is 4 full Ethereum blocks of gas for 12-cent arbitrage. And how we actually find these is we look at these failed attempts. We saw a successful example, and this is a failed example. It looks like a regular transaction if you look at it. There's none of the fun, fancy insights that EtherScan adds to it. So you can see, there's no token transfers, and it's just a successful execution, but it uses 2.6 million gas, and it does nothing suspicious. This is probably also not readable, but these are some of the logs from the transaction. And you can see that this transaction is constantly querying pool state. So it is essentially just checking a bunch of pools on chain and doing some type of computation to see if there's an arbitrage between different pools. And so this really is the spam bot loop. You send a transaction, it lands on chain. What is happening is it goes and checks 50 pools. It checks if there is some type of arbitrage between 2 different pools. If it does, it executes it. So it will actually swap the assets on one, sell them on another. If not, it does nothing. So basically, we're using a large amount of gas just to read prices and do nothing. By we, I mean these searchers. Yeah, and so this is the core insight. On L1, we didn't see this type of activity because gas was so expensive and block times were so large. So a block comes in, you've got another 12 seconds before the next block. You can download that block, you can check all of the pools on chain, you can see, there's an arbitrage for 50 bucks, and then now you can go to your friendly block builder and pay them, which is passed on to the validator, 49 bucks to try and execute this arbitrage. But because L2s are so fast and so cheap, it's in a completely different paradigm. So the one example was 2 cents to execute, but often we see 1 cent per execution, and we even see $10,000 arbitrages people are finding. So you can see how this quickly gets very out of hand. On top of that, the more L2s become used, the more arbitrages that are available. So the root causes of spam. I mentioned some of them. So transaction expressivity, So on-chain programs with conditional logic, not static orders. So they are actually like doing this searching on-chain and looking for things. Private mempools are another example. They are good. They stop like sandwiching and front running, but the fact that you can't see any of this like signal, it's all private. You need to wait till it's on chain, and then that forces you to spam. You're optimistically assuming I'm going to do some user is going to swap on chain, and it costs you 1 cent to just hope that you're going to land behind that person on chain and extract some arbitrage. And then, yeah, cheap fees, and then no efficient auctions. So that's like the key point of this, is that people are just yeeting thousands of transactions on chain, just hoping to land behind every single person on chain to check if there's an arbitrage. So I'll go through some findings from the OP stack, from OP stack rollups. So the spam is systemic. Maybe I can zoom in. Okay. Hopefully that's better. So when we did this analysis, which I believe this went up to June 2025. We've got some new updated numbers, but you can see that the share of gas used by spam bots is insane. On Unichain alone, they were accounting for over 60% of the gas were these spam bots. You can see on Base, we were also close to 40%, and Optimism, and then World was also close to 20%. Yeah, so spam underpays massively. So the key stat here is, on OP mainnet, for example, so spam used 57% of the gas, but they only paid 9% of the fees, which is kind of insane. Resource usages on Base, for example, is another one. So yeah, you can see that non-spam accounted for about 44% of the gas used, and actual spam accounted for 56%. And then the other really interesting insight is that L2s also pay DA costs to the L1. So the non-spam accounted for 74% of the DA, but the actual spam accounted for 26% of DA. And there's also some more analysis on the fees paid, which I mentioned. So yeah, we've got some more. In interest of time, I won't go too deep into this one, but we can see that as the gas per second increased, or like the effective throughput, the amount of spam also, the amount of on-chain searching also increased. Some more graphs. I will skip through this, but if you're interested, let me know. Some more analysis we did as well is looking into who is actually doing the spam. There's no way to actually attribute the specific bots across different addresses. So a lot of searchers will have multiple different types of arbitrage strategies, and they will split those across different addresses. Sometimes they're very fun, and they leave a little mark in their address. They like to do little, they like to, mine for different addresses, so they have a little signature, but oftentimes they're not that nice. So top spam gas users by smart contracts, we see that this 0xBFF69 accounted for about 23.9% in this block period. And then we have a whole host of ranges of other people doing between 2 to 5%. And then by profit-taking addresses, it is also very interesting, as we have this quite, triopoly of people that are actually taking profit. And so, yeah, this is ultimately the efficiency gap we see. It is 200K gas for a 2-swap ARB, but it's 130 million gas in practice on Base, and this is 650x gap to close. So how do we move forward? 2 pillars that we believe are the path forward here, programmable privacy and explicit bidding. So as I mentioned, part of the problem here is that all of these transactions are private until they land on chain. On Ethereum L1, there are mechanisms to expose parts of these transactions to searchers and let them compete to backrun these transactions. Backrunning is just trying to insert yourself behind the user transaction. So we typically call these like order flow auctions, and there's a variety of variants on the layer 1. There are some on layer 2s, but because the mempool is private by default, they are like a little bit less efficient. And so what we believe the answer to this is like actually giving some type of real-time access to TX flow to searchers while programmatically restricting what they can do. So the holy grail of this would be, hey, I can give searcher A access to some user's transaction data as long as I could be sure that they are not going to take advantage of it. And then the other pillar of this is that like we do want to create an actual auction. So what do I mean by actual auction? Well, today, as I mentioned, people just send 1,000 transactions, and they're just competing against every other transaction to land on chain. And what we want to do is say like, hey, here's a user's transaction that creates MEV. All of you searchers bid to be behind this, not bid behind every other transaction. This allows us to create an efficient auction. An efficient auction should, in theory, bid most of the value of the arbitrage back to the user or the chain, or however it wants to be distributed. So we think, as taking a step back, I mentioned this fancy primitive, like how could we actually give a searcher a user-sensitive transaction data and convince them to not leak that data? Well, we think, we really shouldn't scale this based on trust and legal contracts. That's not what blockchains are for. So we believe strongly in trusted execution environments. These are a specific type of hardware that produces something called an attestation. And this is some type of like commitment from the hardware about what software it's running. From here, we run a IO restricted sandbox on these trusted execution environments. So this is a fancy way of saying we can control what goes in and out of the TEE. And as well, it enables searchers to deploy proprietary searching logic to it in a way that we can't see, but we can still give them access to this sensitive data. This allows us to safely share sensitive user data without risk of the user getting sandwiched or these types of things. Another thing that we're building on top of this is a primitive we'll be rolling out pretty soon. It's actually a family of protocols called Signal Boost, and as you can probably guess, part of this problem is these private mempools don't share any of their signal. So we want to create a variety of primitives that allow different types of order flows to share signal with these searchers to allow efficient execution and reattribution of the value back to the user and the chain. So there's some early results that we find searchers inside of TEs are, these are very early, by the way, so we'll actually post some stuff here pretty soon. But we are finding that when we give searchers inside of TEs full access to the transaction data, they are able to more efficiently extract value than in the case where they're just blind searching. So that's the presentation. We think that solving these types of problems will be fundamentally a fundamental requirement to all chains that want to scale their throughput. No matter if you're an L1 or an L2, you will need to encounter this, and we think the adoption of MEV auctions is not a luxury, but a requirement. Cool, that is it. Thanks.